Hello, my AB Calculus students. Welcome to a lovely question. This is 2009, question number 3. This is an FTC question for topic, and I say and more. They just had a bunch of stuff that, hey, maybe you've never seen before, but some of the parts are more likely to show up on multiple choice. And this is part of the reason why I gave you guys the multiple choice test the other day. I don't know, the free response questions, if this year, I really feel like you're going to almost feel a little bit like, part A and B might feel like two multiple choice questions strung together about one topic. So I wanted to get your brain back into the way you could think about multiple choice tests. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what in the world is going on. So in this first question, part A, and it's weird. It's not difficult. It is not difficult. It is weird, though. They give you an important piece of information. They tell me the area underneath the curve of f from -6 to 5 is 7. And you're thinking, well, that's great information. Thanks. And then they want to know what's the area from -6 to -2. And it's almost like, what's going on here? There doesn't even seem to be a question until you go to look at the graph. And when you go to look at the graph and you're like, oh, if this is the graph of f, this simply means what's the area under the graph from -6 to -2. And then you go over to the graph and you realize there is no graph there. So earlier, when they told you the area from -6 to 5, that was from -6. That's way off the screen. All the way here to 5 was that answer. And that's where things get weird. So how are we going to deal with this? So I'm going to use this answer of 7 in just a bit to help me, but let's go ahead and think about it. If I want to find the area, if I know the area from -6 to 5, let's break that up. If I know the area from -6 to 5, I can break this up into 2 chunks. And that's exactly what I want to do. So the area from -6 to 5 would be if I broke it up and found the area of this one chunk plus the area of this other chunk. So this whole area is the area from -6 to -2 plus, if I had to continue, -6 to -2, I got to get all the way to 5. So plus -2 to 5. This is indeed what we have to do. You see, here in this question, I actually know this area. They said, hey, the whole area of all of this is 7. This is the piece we're trying to find. Work hands, okay. And we actually can find this. And of course, the reason we can find all of this is because I have the graph. So this simply means if you're looking at the graph of f, what's the area from -2 to 5. Now, the first thing you might notice when you go to find the whole area from -2 to 5, I better give myself a lot of space, is, and this is the first thing I noticed, I saw that this area here was the same as this area here, but one of them is above the curve, it counts as positive area, and one of them is below the curve and it counts as negative area. And I wanted to cancel them out, and you could cancel them out, but you're going to have to then figure out what in the heck to do over here. So it was a little bit weird. What am I going to do with this thin little sliver? So I said at the end of the day, you know what, forget it. Let's just find the area of this triangle. I'm not going to worry that they cancel out because then I have to deal with this anyways. Let me just deal with each piece. So I first started with what's the area of this triangle. And remember, area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So that's 1/2 1 times 1. Great. And now minus. And I just went ahead and took on this whole triangle. I took this whole thing on. Now, of course, the area of this whole triangle I'm counting as negative because it's below the curve. And I know it's 1/2 base times height. The height I know. The height is 1. It goes down to -1. So the height is -1. So what's the whole base? Well, how far is this, or where exactly is this? And if you look at this right away, it looks like it's halfway between 0 and 1. And it is. If you go up 1 over half, up 1 over half, up 1 over half, up 1 over half, you end up here. So this looks like that 0.5, and it is 0.5, which is good. So the base of this triangle is 1, and then that 0.5. So this is 1.5. And I have no clue why I used -1 for the height. I apologize. Okay, let's continue. We now need to find the area of this triangle. And again, this whole distance here, this is 1.5, and it has a height of 3. So plus 1/2 base times height. The base is another 1.5, and the height is 3. And then that leaves this area here. And this area here is a royal pain. Let me ignore that for a second. This area here is a rectangle minus a quarter circle. So what's the area of a rectangle? Well, here this is 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3. It turns out it's a square. 3 times 3. And then I keep moving this over further, minus a quarter of a circle. Remember, a circle is pi r squared, so this is 1/4 of pi r squared. Okay, and what's going to go there for the r? Well, you can easily count the radius of the circle as 1, 2, 3. If you were to make the big circle, get radius 1, 2, 3, and there you go. Okay, now I wish I was done, and I'm so close to being done, except for one small fact. They need to know, what is this? So remember, the whole area was 7. We broke it up into the little area plus this other little area. This one we're trying to find, and this is what we got. So my final answer is I'm going to have to take all of this and subtract it to the other side. So it's going to be 7 minus all of this. Now I'm going to be lazy. If it's going to be 7 minus all of this, I'm just going to do a little erasing and say my answer is 7 minus all of that. And there you go. Okay, that's a horrid number. I don't even know what it is, but we're just going to say that's our answer and move on. That's part A. Okay, now let's go to part B. Part B, I am telling you, this is what they're going to do on the AP exam this year somewhere. I know it. I feel it. They want to know what's the area from 3 to 5, but then it's the area of the graph of f prime x. I don't have the graph of f prime x. What am I going to do? So here is what I'm doing in this question. I'm actually going to follow the rules. You see, if somebody said, hey, what's the antiderivative of f prime x from 2 to 3? I would follow the rules. I would say, well, first of all, what's the antiderivative of f prime x? F of x. And then I would plug in the top and the bottom and subtract. And this is exactly what I have to do in this problem here. Now, what is the antiderivative of all this? Well, to find the antiderivative of all this, I broke this up. I didn't have to break it up, but I did. And then this 2 here, so the 2 stays with this piece. I just slid the 2 to the outside. And now I said, okay, the 2's to the outside. What's the antiderivative of f prime x? F of x. And what's the antiderivative of 4? It's simply 4x. And then again, I'm going to plug in the top and the bottom and subtract. So I get a 2. Now I'm going to plug a 5 here and here. So 2 f of 5 plus 4 times 5. So I put a 5 in there. Minus... Oh, and by the way, you've got to use parentheses. Not in the first piece, you don't have to, but the second piece. Whenever there's a minus sign, like quotient rule, or if you're doing product rule, you got to use parentheses if there's a plus or minus anywhere. Now I'm going to plug in a 3. So 2 f of 3 plus 4 times 3. Now remember, this is America, a great country where you do not need to simplify things, but you do have to simplify this. F of 5 is not a number. I'm going to leave everything else. I don't care to simplify it. No one's going to make me. But again, I got to find out what are those two values. And the good news, f of 5 is simply an ordered pair. If this is the graph of f of x f of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What ordered pair do we have on the graph? So if you go to the graph, f of 5 is right here. The ordered pair is 5, comma, 0. So f of 5 is 0. Nice. And now I need to know what is f of 3. And f of 3, I did not leave enough space for. Who would have thought? Remember that random ordered pair they gave you? That's so you knew what f of 3 was. 3 minus the square root of 5. I did not leave enough space, so I'll have to make space. 3 minus the square root of 5. And there you go. Could I simplify it? Yes. Am I going to simplify it? Nope. And that's part B. All right, part C. And man, this question, it is crazy long. There's a lot going on here. So this next question introduces g of x. Our good friend g of x is this. And they want to know, when does g have an absolute maximum? Find the absolute maximum value of g on the interval. And ladies and gentlemen, how do you find out absolute maxes and mins on the interval? Well, who can win the absolute max or min awards? Endpoints and critical points. So because this is on the interval -2 to 5, make sure that is the interval, yep. The absolute max or min, special words, endpoints or critical points. So my endpoints are time equals -2 and 5. And again, I want to know the value of g. Now, what goes on? What are your endpoints and critical points? These are your endpoints. What are your critical points? Your critical points are where the derivative is equal to 0. Well, before I can set the derivative equal to 0, I need the derivative equation. So remember, if you take the derivative here, you take the derivative here. You get more information. And if I take the derivative destroys the antiderivative, the x jumps in. Times chain. Now the chain is the derivative of x, which is 1, so I don't have to write it. So g prime x is equal to f of x. And this is crazy great news. They told me this was the graph of f, but now I know it's also the graph of g prime. Okay? So g prime x is f of x. So if this is the graph of f of x, it's also the graph of g prime. And the question is, when is g prime x equal to 0? In other words, when is f of x equal 0? G prime x equals 0 when f of x is 0. So let's go ahead and look at the graph. When is f of x equal to 0? And f of x is equal to 0 here, and here, and we don't have to include that because it's an endpoint. Endpoints are not critical points. So -1 and 0.5. Okay. Now here's where things look like they're going to get really crappy really quick, because if any of these can win, I need to find all of their values. And you might be like, that's a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. But I'm going to make a sign chart of g prime x since I'm looking for an absolute max. Some of these are not in the running for absolute max awards. They are only in the running for absolute min awards. So let me remind you and show you what I mean. So remember here, I'm making a sign chart of g prime x, and g prime x is f of x. So I'm making a sign chart of this graph. I got -2, I have 5, I have my critical points of -1 and 0.5, and now again my signs, positive values, negative values. So it's positive, negative, positive. So what does this tell me? Well, this tells me the graph of f was, the graph of g was increasing, and then decreasing, and then increasing. Why is this helpful? Well, it tells me -2 and 0.5 could only have won the minimum awards. So, not in the runnings. The ones that could have won the absolute maxes are -1 and 5. So, if you wanted to write this out, candidates for absolute max are x equals -1 and x equals 5, or if you just cross them out. Okay, great. So all I need to do is find these two values. Okay, let's go ahead and first find the first value. What is g of -1? All right, so how am I going to find g of negative 1? Well, I'm just going to plug it in. G of negative 1 is the area from negative 2 to negative 1, which is simply the area underneath the graph of f from negative 2 to negative 1. Well, what's the area from negative 2 to negative 1? They just want this area right here. And that is going to be the 1/2 base times height. The base is 1, the height is 1, and that's a half. Nice. And now let's go ahead and find 5. And this is the part that's absolutely crazy horrible, except you've already done all the work. G of 5 is the area from negative 2 to 5 of f of t. In part A, do you remember where we had 7 equals some integral plus and we had all this crap? Well, all of this crap over here was the area from negative 2 to 5. You could just copy. I know you didn't simplify it, and you shouldn't have. You just take all that and you put it there. Okay? And I already simplified it. When I say I already simplified it, I already looked online. And so I don't have to copy down all this crap. I'll just tell you what it was. It was 11 minus 9 pi over 4. And maybe you don't know which one of those is bigger. Okay? I will tell you this one is bigger, so that's the absolute max. But how did I know that one was going to end up being the bigger value? Okay? Well, here's how I knew. Look at the sign chart that we just made a second ago from negative 2 to 5. And here we had a negative 1 and a 0.5, and it went plus, minus, plus. Remember, the plus and the minus tell you if it increases or decreases. But the amount of area tells you how much it increased by. Look at this. You see that? That's just a little bit of area. So the graph only went up a little bit. Now look at this negative area. This negative area is more than that area, so it's going to go down, and it's going to go down by a little bit more than it went up. So and it goes down, and it ends up somewhere over here below this, but not by much. But now look at the area here. Look at all that positive area. And all that positive area, it's a ton, told you how much it went up by. And that tells me that if it went up a little, went down a little bit more, went up a ton, this has got to be the absolute max. So even if you didn't simplify it and you had that whole big pile, you can rest assured that big pile is the max. Wow, this has been a long video. My computer turned itself off. It said, I don't know about this. All right, we got to go to part D now. Alright, so part D, we have a limit question. And ladies and gentlemen, this is by far the worst thing I had to grade when I was grading your free response quizzes. So many of you got to the limit question and you immediately, before doing anything else, you said, oh, use L'Hopital's. And then you went ahead and you immediately took the derivative of everything. That's what you did on the quiz. You're like, oh, it's a limit question, it must be L'Hopital's. No, 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 no. L'Hopital's only occurs if you get 0 over 0. And folks, if there's a limit question in the test, you need to plug in, you need to show you get 0 over 0. If you don't write 0 over 0 and the word use L'Hopital's, no points. And then when you take the derivative, you have to keep this part. And most of you did not keep this part on the quiz either. I didn't take away the points, but you just won't get the points on the AP exam. So if you did L'Hopital's, you first have to show you get 0 over 0. Then you'd write to use the words use L'Hopital's, and then when you go to take the derivative of the top and of the bottom, you have to make sure to keep this limit of x minus 1. You have to rewrite it. If you don't rewrite it, you can't get the points. It's so crappy, but it's true. But guess what? This isn't a L'Hopital's question, because you don't get 0 over 0. You get an answer. Well, the answer is 10 to the first minus, notice I'm just going to plug a 1 in there, 10 to the first power, 3 times f prime 1, f of 1, and then arctan of 1. So I get 10 to the first is 10 minus 3. And we've got some things we got to answer. We have to answer what is this? What is this? And on the AP exam, I know this is America. America's a great country, but you can't leave sine of pi or sine of 2 pi or cosine of 4 pi over 3. You can't leave sines, cosines, or tangents and walk away. You have to plug them in and actually find out what they are. Okay, that's the one rule they have about leaving things unsimplified. But let's start here. What does it mean to find f prime 1? Well, if this is the graph of f prime 1 means what's the slope of the tangent line at 1. So I'm going to go on this graph to 1, and I want to know what's the slope of the tangent line. Well, the slope of the tangent line is the slope of this whole line. So if I count rise over run, it rises 1, 2, 3, 4, and it runs 2. So 4 over 2, that's my slope. Of course, you could say 4 over 2 is 2, but whatever. F of 1. F of 1 is literally the ordered pair. What is the ordered pair at 1? Right here is the ordered pair 1, comma 1. So f of 1 is 1. And now we need to know what is arctan of 1. And arctan of 1 is 0. And we can leave the answer like this. But why is arctan 1 0? I need to remind you, what does arctan 1 mean? Arctan 1 is another way of saying, or tan negative 1, 1. This is the answer to a question. This is the answer to the question. Tangent of what angle equals 1? So we need to find what angle. That does not look like a 1. That looks like someone's playing the game of Hangman. Tangent of what angle is 1? That's what arctan of 1 means. And if you go to your quadrant angles, none of them work. But if you go to the pi over 4, did I put 0? It is not 0. Wow. If you go to pi over 4, I don't even know why I put that. Okay. Anyways, if you go to pi over 4, tangent, opposite over adjacent, 1 over 1 gives you 1. So arctan of 1 means tangent of what angle is 1, and it's tangent of pi over 4, opposite over adjacent, that gives you 1. And there you go. And that's the final part. It's a long video, so I understand it. But I'm telling you, these parts A, B, C, D are very important. You can earn some points. Yes, it's difficult, and that's okay. Have a good day.